Hi, you're watching Reddit Revelations.
There's a look people give when they think they're smarter than you. It's not smug. It's in the way they let silence fill the room after they've said something hurtful, like they're testing how long it takes for you to crack, to prove them wrong or confirm their suspicions. My wife had started wearing that look a few days ago. It began subtly. I came home from work as usual, carrying the mental weight of meetings, phone calls, and unrealistic deadlines. I was dead tired, but not so much that I didn't notice the small things. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She asked about my day, but didn't wait for the answer. I told myself it was nothing. People have off days. But she wasn't off. And I was the target. Dinner that night was already on the table, if you could call it dinner. Microwave steam still clung to the sides of the plastic containers. I hadn't expected a home-cooked meal, but something about the gesture, the way she plopped it down without a word, then vanished into her phone, made it feel like a statement. The food was just a placeholder. So was the conversation. Rough day. I had asked, trying to offer a bridge. She didn't even look up. Aren't they all? I chewed my food in silence, wondering if I should ask what was really going on. But I didn't. I made excuses for her. Maybe she was stressed. People drift in and out of rhythm. I figured we'd reconnect by the weekend. The next day, I left early for work, but came home late after helping a colleague finish a project. I sent her a text to let her know, got no reply. When I walked through the door, I found her curled up on the couch, laptop open, glass of wine in hand, laughing at something on the screen. She didn't pause or even glance at me when I stepped in. "Hey," I said, slipping off my shoes. Her eyes didn't leave the laptop. I sat down beside her, trying to close the small gap between us, but she slid her legs away instinctively like I had brought in some kind of contagious discomfort with me. I asked if she wanted to do something together, watch a movie, take a walk. She responded without looking up. "I'm fine where I am." There was something cold in that. Not mean, just dismissive. Like I was a stray breeze that had wandered in, nothing she needed to acknowledge. Later that night, I watched her sleep while lying wide awake. Had I forgotten something? An anniversary? Was I distant? Had I said something cruel without realizing? I kept trying to find the thread that would explain this unraveling. But every possibility felt forced, like I was trying to assign reason to something that didn't have one. She wasn't sad. She was curious. Curious about how far she could push me. Somewhere deep down, I started to feel like I was being examined. Measured. Not for affection or attention, but for durability. There's something about the third day of anything that reveals more than the first two. It's when patterns become decisions. When behavior stops being circumstantial and starts being deliberate. That morning, I woke up before her. She had been staying up later lately, her side of the bed still cold by the time I was brushing my teeth. I made coffee for both of us, a routine that usually brought at least a smile or a mumbled thanks. Not this time. She walked into the kitchen, saw the mug, sniffed it, then dumped it down the sink like it had personally offended her. I stood there holding the pot, the smell of fresh roast still lingering. She didn't explain. She just poured herself some almond milk and left the room. That afternoon, she posted a photo online of her lunch at a trendy little cafe we had once planned to visit together. Her caption? "Finally eating where I want to eat. No more waiting around for someone else's schedule." She hadn't invited me, but she knew I'd see it. It was bait. She was throwing stones just to watch the ripples, waiting to see how wide they'd spread. That night, things went further. We were supposed to attend a dinner at her friend's house, nothing fancy, just a small get-together. I had forgotten all about it until she walked in wearing that new dress, the one with the slanted neckline and subtle shimmer she claimed she bought for something special. "You coming or not?" she asked, already halfway out the door. I changed quickly and followed, unsure if I even wanted to go anymore. The car ride was silent except for the sound of her chewing gum and checking her makeup in the mirror. We arrived, she kissed me on the cheek, not affectionately, more like a signature, and disappeared into the crowd as soon as we entered. I spent most of the evening on the periphery. Her friends made polite small talk with me, but they didn't include me in any of the deeper conversations. She was too busy laughing at someone's joke, leaning in close. I watched the way her eyes lit up when they weren't looking at me. I watched her let her guard down just enough to make it obvious, then snap it back in place the moment she remembered I was still there. That night, lying in bed again, I couldn't sleep. What kept me awake was the realization that I was no longer confused. She was pushing, and this day had just ended. I rolled over, looked at her sleeping face, peaceful and untouched by guilt, and thought, not for the first time, but with more clarity than ever before. She's not ready for what happens on day 4. I don't know what made her bolder that day. Maybe she thought I'd finally cracked and given up. But something changed the moment day 3 turned into evening. We were at her sister's house. A birthday party for her nephew, one of those obligatory family things that start with pizza and end with strained smiles. I hadn't wanted to go, not after everything that had been brewing, but she insisted we show face as a couple. Her words, not mine. It was the first time in weeks she'd even referred to us as a unit, and I should have known then it wasn't a peace offering. She wore that smirk again, the one that said she knew something I didn't, and the whole ride there she kept herself entertained by scrolling through her phone, giggling at private messages she didn't bother to hide. When I glanced over once, she tilted the screen away like I was some nosy stranger sitting next to her on the bus. No shame. No hesitation. At the house, things started fine. Her family greeted us like nothing was off, though I caught her sister watching me a little too closely, like she was waiting for me to flinch. I knew that look. The kind someone gives when they've heard one version of a story and are waiting to see if the other side will prove it wrong or just confirm it silently. The evening moved on. Drinks were passed around. Laughter got louder. The kids disappeared into another room to watch a movie while the adults migrated to the backyard. It was cool out, the kind of breeze that hinted autumn wasn't far off, and I remember thinking it would have been a nice night if it didn't feel so loaded. Then it happened. I was walking back from the cooler with 2 bottles, one for me, one for her, when I heard her voice cutting through the light chatter. She was standing with her sister, a cousin, and a few of her friends from work. All women. All comfortably tipsy. And I wasn't close enough for her to see me approaching from behind. "You know what I've realized," she said, her tone bright, like she was making some important, amusing observation. "Marriage is just a game of chicken. You push and push until someone blinks." Someone laughed. Then she continued, "I've been testing him. Like, how much can I get away with before he finally grows a spine?" Another laugh. Not shocked, not judgmental, just entertained. I swear, I could sleep in another man's bed, and he'd probably ask if I remembered to use protection. The group howled. I froze mid-step, bottles still in hand, the condensation suddenly colder against my skin. The laughter pierced through me because of how effortless it sounded. Like I was a shared secret, a broken toy they'd passed around for amusement. "I mean," she added, "he still opens doors for me, still pays the bills, still acts like we're in some fairy tale marriage. And all I have to do is say I'm tired or stressed, and he backs off." Someone asked if she thought I knew. She shrugged. "If he does, he's too scared to say anything. Honestly, it's kind of pathetic." The women cackled again. I stood there, invisible. Not in a metaphorical way, literally invisible to her, to them, to the entire moment. And in that frozen minute, everything clicked. The past 3 days weren't random. They were her pushing limits, tightening the vise to see if I'd squeak or scream. I walked back inside like nothing happened, handed her the drink, and let the evening play out. She accepted the bottle with a wink like she was rewarding a dog for fetching a stick. I smiled back. My voice didn't shake. But inside, everything had shifted. By the time we got home, she was humming to herself in the bathroom mirror, wiping off her makeup, replaying highlights of the evening under her breath. I watched from the doorway, half in shadow, and she didn't even notice. That night, I didn't touch her. I didn't reach for her hand or kiss her goodnight. I lay beside her like a stranger in my own bed, staring at the ceiling, wide awake while she drifted off with that same smug piece she'd worn for days. She thought I'd blinked. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't ask about her plans. I left for work early without saying a word, and for the first time, she noticed. She sent a text around noon. "Everything okay?" As if the performance had taken a strange turn she hadn't choreographed. I didn't respond. By evening, she was waiting at the door, fake concern etched across her face. "You didn't answer me," she said, watching my expression. "I was busy," I replied, brushing past her. She blinked, thrown by how effortlessly I dismissed her. The smallest crack appeared in her mask. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage, phone in hand, reading a list of things I hadn't dared to research until now. Financial disentanglement. Psychological manipulation in marriages. Each answer made one thing clearer. Because now I had everything I needed. And tomorrow, I'd start to use it. The next few days moved like clockwork, but not the kind you win with care. More like a timer ticking down in the background, each second a quiet warning of something closing in. She didn't see it, though. She assumed I was brooding. that I needed time to sulk and I'd come crawling back once the silence got too loud. On Monday morning, I canceled the recurring transfers from our joint account. Nothing flashy. Just paused a few automated deposits she probably hadn't even noticed were being routed into her personal spending pot. Clothing subscriptions, premium services, her spa membership, all luxuries I'd never once used but had silently funded. I didn't tell her. Tuesday, I called the bank and asked them to switch our mortgage notifications to my work email only. Nothing explosive, just the tiniest fractures in her sense of control. But the shift wasn't just financial. It was emotional, behavioral. Every little piece she used to test my patience, I handed it back to her with gloves on. That week, I stopped reacting to her small provocations. When she mentioned how late I was getting home, I nodded and walked past. When she commented that I'd stopped shaving, "You used to care about how you looked," I gave her a simple, noted, and returned to whatever I was doing. She tried sarcasm next. Snide remarks dropped like crumbs she hoped I'd chase. "Oh, so the ghost speaks now," she said when I finally answered a basic question at dinner. "I've always spoken," I replied, my tone calm. "You just stopped listening a while ago." Her eyes flicked up, surprised. But I didn't linger. I went back to eating, unfazed, and that did more damage than any argument would have. By Thursday, she had grown twitchy. The passive-aggressive jabs came more often, each one carrying a note of desperation under its sting. I could feel it. The shift in balance. The unease when the usual tactics stopped working. The silence was no longer a canvas for her monologue, it was becoming a mirror. The following evening, I stopped by a notary's office on my way home. The woman at the desk barely glanced up as I slid the packet of documents across the counter, bank authorizations, property review forms, and a request to freeze all non-essential household upgrades unless approved by both parties. Everything was neat. Legal. I wasn't filing for divorce. Not yet. But I was drawing a line. That night, I came home with takeout from her favorite Thai place. She blinked when I handed her the bag, half expecting a catch. There wasn't one. I didn't ask how her day went. I simply turned and walked upstairs. 10 minutes later, she came into the room holding her food, but not eating it. "Okay," she said, standing at the foot of the bed like I was a puzzle missing half the box. "What's going on?" I looked up from my book and closed it calmly. "You tell me." She scoffed. "Don't pull that reverse psychology crap. You've been weird for a week." "No," I said evenly. "I've just been quiet." "There's a difference." She frowned. "So this is what now? The silent treatment?" I stood and walked past her toward the closet, not answering right away. As I reached for a shirt, I said, "You pushed. You wanted to see what I'd do when I hit my limit. Well, here we are." I said it like fact. That was what shook her. "You're being dramatic," she muttered, folding her arms. "No," I replied, pulling my shirt over my head. "You're used to getting the last word. This isn't drama. This is consequence." She didn't follow me when I left the room. That weekend, I stayed out most of Saturday. No text, no updates. I let her stew in the same ambiguity she'd bathed me in for weeks. When I returned, she was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, waiting for some invitation back to the center of attention. I walked past her. Didn't ask if she ate. That night, as I folded laundry in the guest room, she leaned on the doorway. "You're punishing me." "No," I said without looking up. "I'm learning." She tilted her head. "Learning what?" "How to live without you." Her face twitched, the slightest flinch of someone not used to being the one left behind. The next morning, I made coffee. Just one cup. I didn't ask if she wanted any. She sat at the kitchen island, watching me, waiting for the routine to resume. It didn't. "I thought we could talk," she said, her voice cautious. "Talk about what?" She hesitated. "Us." I nodded. "Sure. But I'm not interested in apologies you don't mean or explanations you've rehearsed." Her mouth opened, then closed again. I picked up my mug and headed for the door. "You think you're winning something here?" she called after me. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time in days. "No. I think I stopped playing." That was the moment it shifted for her. I saw it. The realization that I wasn't angry or trying to guilt her or teach her a lesson. I was just done. Not in the dramatic, slamming doors way. Done in the quiet, irreversible way. The kind that doesn't announce itself but leaves no room for rebuttal. Later that night, I booked a room downtown for the following week. Just 3 nights. A brief trial run at detachment. I didn't give her reasons. I simply left the note on the kitchen counter. "You've got the space. Let's see what you do with it." By the time she read it, I was already gone. She'd spent days testing me. Now I was testing her. And unlike her little games, mine had rules. The room I booked wasn't anything extravagant. Mid-level hotel, clean enough, quiet. I didn't choose it for the luxury, I chose it because it was unfamiliar. And that's exactly what I needed. A place where her voice had never echoed, where I wasn't reminded of the life we built just for her to dismantle piece by piece. I spent the first night doing nothing, no television, no calls. Just silence. Not the strained kind we'd shared under one roof. This was different. This was mine. I sat by the window, sipping black coffee long gone cold, staring down at the passing cars and wondering how long it had been since I actually made a decision purely for myself. Not for compromise. Just for me. Back at home, she texted twice that night. The first was vague, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" The second came 2 hours later, "So we're just not talking now?" I didn't answer either. The following morning, she tried again. Her tone shifted. Less attitude, more concern, though I couldn't tell if it was genuine. "I'm sorry if I've gone too far. Can we talk when you're ready?" That last part caught my eye. When you're ready. As if the power had shifted and she could sense it, even if she didn't fully understand how or when. But I still didn't respond. Instead, I met with an attorney that afternoon. No filing. Just information. I asked questions she never thought I'd ask, about joint assets, discretionary clauses, financial autonomy. I learned about a few rights I hadn't known I had. I listened more than I spoke. The lawyer gave me a folder I left unopened until I got back to the hotel. That evening, I decided to call someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, my younger brother, Chris. We drifted over the years. He never liked how she talked to me. He used to joke, "Man, if I had your patience, I'd be a monk." I never laughed back then. Now, I understood what he meant. We met at a bar not far from my hotel. We talked for the first time in years. When I told him what had been going on, he didn't even blink. "I always thought she had something cruel in her," he said, sipping his drink. "But I figured if you were putting up with it, maybe I just didn't get it." "You got it," I said. "I just didn't want to admit it." He asked me what my plan was. I told him the truth. I wasn't entirely sure. But I knew this. I wasn't going back the same man she sent out that door. He clapped me on the shoulder. "That's a good start." When I got back to the hotel, there was a voicemail waiting. Her voice was tired, shaky, unusually soft. I know you're upset. I know I pushed things. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I thought maybe you'd get angry and then we'd argue and move on like always. But this is different. And I don't like how it feels." That last sentence. That's the one that lingered. I don't like how it feels. Not I realize I've been cruel. Just discomfort at being left alone in the consequences of her own actions. I went home. Not to return. To observe. I entered quietly. She was in the kitchen, hair tied back, no makeup. She looked up like she'd been rehearsing a monologue all night. "Hey," she said carefully. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, placing my keys on the counter. "Just came to grab a few things." She tried to keep her tone casual, but her eyes followed me with unspoken questions. "You're not moving out, are you?" I walked past her, into the bedroom, and started packing just a small suitcase. A few shirts. Some files from the drawer. No slamming. Just motion. Clean and simple. "Are we not even going to talk about this?" she asked, following me. "We will," I replied. "But not now. Not like this." She looked genuinely shaken for the first time. I didn't mean any of it. I was just, I don't know, angry. Testing limits. I didn't think. "You didn't think I'd stop waiting," I said. "But I did." Her lip trembled. She stepped closer. "I can change. If you give me the chance." "You had the chance," I said. "For weeks. You saw where the line was and kept stepping closer just to see if I'd flinch. Well, now you know what happens when you go too far." "You're overreacting," she whispered, defaulting to the only weapon she had left, minimization. I shook my head. "No, I'm just finally reacting at all." And then I walked past her. Back at the hotel that night, I laid the folder from the attorney on the desk and opened it. Inside were options, paths I could take. Each one outlined with precision and clarity. No revenge. Just resolution. The next morning, she sent one final text. "Please don't do this. Please." I stared at it for a long time. Because for the first time, her words carried weight, and yet, they arrived too late. I put my phone down, stepped into my clothes, and headed out to start the day. A day that no longer required her approval. A day that would begin and end entirely on my terms. The pieces had been moved. Her test was complete, and the final answer was already on its way. I didn't expect her to let go easily. What I didn't expect was how quickly she'd unravel once I stopped holding the fabric of us together. The next week came in waves. First, denial. She called twice a day, left voicemails as if we were simply working through a tiff that had gone a touch too far. She kept her tone light, asking about my day, wondering if I'd be home for dinner, even joking about the overdue rain, like we were still in the same weather system. We weren't. Then came guilt. She sent photos from our early days, vacations, birthdays, blurry selfies and bad lighting that used to make us laugh. Each picture arrived with a caption designed to tug at something. Remember this? We were good, weren't we? Can't we get back there? But the truth was, those images didn't sting. They felt distant, like watching someone else's life flicker across a screen. I didn't ache for what we'd had. I felt relief that I could see it now for what it had been, weighted in one direction, shaped by silent compromise. And finally came desperation. On Friday, I came home briefly to gather a few more things. She was waiting. No makeup this time. Hair unstyled. Her eyes were red, not from anger, but from exhaustion. She didn't speak at first. Just watched me move from room to room with a quiet that felt foreign to her. Stillness was never her weapon. She preferred motion, words. But now she had nothing left to throw. When I reached for the last box in the hall closet, she spoke. Do you really hate me? I paused, still facing the shelves. No. She stepped closer. Then why won't you let me fix this? I turned. Because you're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to reset it. Pretend the game didn't go too far. Her lips parted, but I cut in. And even if you were sincere, this isn't about hate or punishment. It's about finality. You're giving up on us. I'm giving up on pretending we still existed. That silence, the one I'd first felt in that hotel room, deep and clean, returned. But this time, it followed me out the door. And she didn't try to stop me. The next day, I filed the papers. There were no fireworks. No arguments in courtrooms. Just signatures, notaries, and a firm handshake from the attorney who now knew more about my life than most of my friends. I opted not to tell her right away. She'd see the envelope soon enough. I wasn't cruel. I didn't want to blindside her. But I also wasn't about to deliver closure like a wrapped gift. Some things need to be felt, not explained. Over the next month, I began rediscovering the man I used to be. The one who didn't second-guess every tone or gesture, worried about setting off some silent chain of consequence. I started seeing friends again, people I hadn't realized I'd pushed away just to keep peace at home. Chris and I started meeting once a week, usually for coffee or late-night walks. We didn't talk about her much. There wasn't a need. He'd seen enough. He simply reminded me that I wasn't alone in my clarity. One evening, he looked at me over his mug and said, "You seem lighter." I feel lighter. She still reached out occasionally. Nothing aggressive. Mostly long texts, typed like letters, where she'd try to sound introspective. She'd talk about growing, about therapy, about wishing she could turn back time. I never blocked her. But I never replied, either. Not out of malice, just indifference. The difference between healing and revenge is that healing doesn't need an audience. The few people who knew, family, close friends, expressed their surprise not that we'd split, but at how quietly it had happened. Some said they thought we looked happy. Others admitted they'd wondered how I put up with it for so long. That question used to bother me. Now I understood the answer. It was that I believed, deeply, in loyalty, in the idea that love could sometimes weather sharp storms. But I also learned something far more valuable. That loyalty becomes self-betrayal when it's given to someone who enjoys watching you drown. One morning, I got a letter in the mail. From her. It wasn't pleading, just honest. She admitted she had mistaken my tolerance for complacency. She thought I was too passive to walk away, too emotionally tethered to detach. She thought wrong. The letter ended with a single line that stayed with me, not for its content, but for what it revealed. I just wish I had known where the edge was before I stepped over it. I folded the paper, placed it back in the envelope, and left it in a drawer I rarely opened. She got her answer, not the one she wanted, but the one she asked for. I moved forward, not with bitterness, but with peace. Sometimes, it's the quiet moment when someone realizes too late that they pushed the only person who ever stayed by choice. That's the moment they never forget. And it's the moment I'll never have to relive. Because some tests don't need to be taken twice.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.